The lobby of the Carter Grand was quiet at that hour. Ryan walked in through the front doors, his coat wrinkled from the flight, a bundle of white flowers tucked under his arm, and a duffel bag hanging from his shoulder. He stepped up to the front desk and gave his name. The two receptionists behind the counter looked him over, once his worn jacket, his tired eyes, and told him there was no reservation. No record. Nothing. Then they called security. What they didn't know, what no one in that lobby knew, was that the man they were about to throw out owned every inch of the building they were standing in. Ryan Carter had not slept on the plane. He rarely did anymore. There was always something to review: occupancy reports, staffing memos, guest satisfaction scores from properties he had not visited in months. He read them the way a doctor reads a patient's chart, looking for the numbers that didn't quite add up, the ones that suggested something was being managed on paper, but not in practice. By the time the plane landed, he had flagged 4 items he wanted to look into personally, and the hotel he was heading to that night was already one of them. He had not told anyone he was coming. That was the point. Ryan had built Carter Hospitality from a single leased property in the mid-Atlantic into a group of 11 full-service hotels over the course of 14 years. And the one thing he had learned early, learned the hard way, was that a hotel behaves differently when it knows the owner is watching. Staff straighten their posture. Managers pull reports they haven't looked at in weeks. The lobby gets a last-minute polish that wouldn't have happened otherwise. None of that told him anything useful. What told him something useful was arriving unannounced in plain clothes, looking exactly like any other tired guest at the end of a long day. He was 39 years old, and looked it. Not in a distinguished way, more in the way of a man who had been carrying something heavy for a long time, and had simply gotten used to the weight. His jacket was a dark navy wool blend, nothing expensive at a glance, and his travel bag was a soft-sided duffel that had seen too many overhead compartments. He looked like someone who booked mid-range rooms online and hoped the Wi-Fi worked. That was more or less the idea. Under his arm, he carried a small bundle of white flowers, wrapped in paper gardenias, her favorite. The date had not slipped his mind. It never did. 6 years had passed since he lost his wife, and he had developed a quiet ritual around it. No matter where he was, he would find the flowers, carry them for the day. And at some point in the evening, he would set them down somewhere that felt right. He had never told anyone at the company about this habit. It was the one thing he kept entirely for himself. The Carter Grand stood near the edge of the business district, a 12-story property with a limestone facade and a lobby that Ryan's former design director had described as restrained but warm. He had approved the renovation plans himself 3 years prior. He remembered standing in this exact lobby when it was still mid-construction, looking at the raw ceiling above the front desk and thinking that the bones of the place were good. He believed that then. He was less certain now, based on the numbers he had read on the plane. He walked in through the revolving doors just past 10 in the evening. The lobby was not crowded, a Tuesday night shoulder season, but it was not empty either. A few guests sat in the lounge area to the left, one man waiting near the elevator with a roller bag, a couple speaking quietly near the concierge stand. The overhead lighting was warm, the marble floor clean, the floral arrangement at the center of the room freshly done. At a glance, everything looked the way it was supposed to look. Ryan crossed to the front desk. 2 receptionists were stationed there. The one on the left was arranging something beneath the counter. The one on the right looked up when he approached. Her name tag read, Claire. She was in her late 20s, dark hair pulled back, the kind of expression that was technically attentive, but gave nothing away. Ryan set his duffel down at his feet and offered a straightforward smile. "Good evening," he said. "I have a reservation. Last name Carter." Claire typed the name into the system. Her expression did not change, but her eyes moved over him once, just once, quick enough that most people would not have caught it before she looked back at the screen. A few seconds passed. Then she typed again. Then she looked up. "I'm not seeing anything under that name," she said. "It should be there. Ryan said. It was booked through the executive portal standard pre-arrival. Carter, Ryan Carter. Claire typed again more slowly this time, as if the deliberateness of the action was itself a response. The second receptionist, Megan, according to her name tag, had stopped what she was doing and drifted closer, positioning herself just behind Claire's shoulder in a way that felt less like assistance and more like alignment. She glanced at Ryan, then at the flowers under his arm, then back at her colleague's screen. "There's nothing here," Claire said. "No reservation, no pending arrival, nothing under that name." "Can you try the corporate account?" Ryan said. "Carter Hospitality. It may have been filed under the company name rather than individually." Claire's fingers moved over the keyboard again. The lobby's background music, something instrumental strings. Tasteful continued underneath the silence between them. Ryan kept his posture easy. He had learned over years of doing this, that the moment you pushed too hard, you changed the dynamic and lost the data he was trying to collect. He wanted to see what they would do if he simply stayed calm and asked reasonable questions. He wanted to see how far it would go. "There's nothing under that account either," Claire said. Megan stepped fully beside her colleague now. "Sir, our system is quite thorough. If there's no record, it means no booking was made, or it may have been made at a different property. I've been to this property before," Ryan said, keeping his voice level. "I'm confident the booking is correct. I'd appreciate it if you could check once more. Sometimes executive reservations sit in a separate queue before they're activated in the main system." The two women exchanged a look. It was brief, barely a second, but Ryan saw it clearly. It was not a look of genuine uncertainty about how to help him. It was a look that communicated something else entirely, a shared assessment, a quiet agreement. He had seen that kind of look before in other lobbies on other visits. It always told him more than the words that followed. "Sir." Megan said, her tone carrying a new quality, now something polished on the surface, but firmer underneath. "We've checked the system thoroughly. There is no record of your reservation. I would suggest checking your confirmation email to see if perhaps you booked a different location." Ryan had no confirmation email because the booking had been made internally through his own company's administrative system. He could have explained this. He could have explained a great deal. Instead, he said, "I don't believe I made a mistake. I'd like you to check one more time." What happened next was not loud, and that was almost the point. Neither Claire nor Megan raised their voices. There was no dramatic confrontation, no pointed words at full volume. What there was instead was a quality of dismissal that was almost more effective for being quiet. Claire stepped back slightly from the keyboard, as if to signal that the conversation at the computer was over. Megan folded her hands on the counter, and the message, delivered entirely through posture and tone, and the careful withdrawal of any further effort, was clear. They had decided he was not worth more of their time. They had looked at him, his jacket, his bag, the flowers, the absence of anything that marked him as someone who mattered, and they had made a decision. "I'm going to have to ask you to step aside," Megan said. "There are other guests who need assistance." Ryan looked at her for a moment. There was no anger in his expression, at least none that showed. What was there, if you looked carefully, was something quieter and more deliberate. A man in the middle of choosing how to respond to what was being done, and choosing not yet. He picked up his duffel. He stepped aside. He sat down on a bench near the edge of the lobby, close enough to the desk that he could observe clearly. He set the flowers across his knees. The marble was cool, and the lighting above was warm, and the music continued unchanged. A few feet away, a couple was being checked in with brisk efficiency, smiling, nodding, receiving their keycards in a leather folder. The same hands, the same desk, the same system. A different outcome. Ryan watched. He noted the body language, the speed of the interaction, the small performances of warmth that appeared when the guests in front of the desk matched whatever profile the receptionists were working from. He had spent years building a company on the premise that every guest, regardless of what they looked like or how they arrived, deserved the same standard of care. It was in the training materials. It was in the brand guidelines. It was in the speech he gave at every new property opening. And here, in one of his own hotels, under his own name, it was not happening. He had a choice to make, and he had known since the moment Claire first looked him over that it was coming. He could identify himself. He could reach into his jacket, pull out the card that said what he was, and watch the entire energy of the front desk reverse in under 30 seconds. That option was always available, but it would tell him nothing he didn't already know, that people behave differently when the stakes become visible. What he wanted to know was something else. He wanted to know what the baseline looked like. He wanted to know what a guest without leverage experienced when they stood at that counter and asked for what they'd paid for. So he made his choice. He stayed where he was. He kept the card in his pocket and the flowers across his lap and the duffel at his feet, and he let the story continue at its own pace. From behind the desk, Megan had picked up the phone. She spoke quietly into it, her back angled slightly away from the lobby. Claire had returned to whatever she had been doing before Ryan arrived. Neither of them looked in his direction. The man near the elevator had gone up. The couple in the lounge had ordered drinks. The night was settling into its ordinary rhythm, and Ryan Carter sat in the middle of it, invisible, in the way that only people who are already dismissed can be invisible. And he waited to see what came next. The answer came in the form of a security guard who appeared from the side corridor near the luggage storage room. He was broad-shouldered, somewhere in his mid-40s, wearing the standard uniform of the hotel dark jacket, silver badge. He crossed the lobby with the particular walk of someone who had been given a task and intended to complete it without complication. He stopped in front of Ryan. "Sir," the guard said, not unkindly, but without room for interpretation. "I've been asked to let you know that the hotel is unable to assist you this evening. I'm going to need to ask you to gather your belongings and exit the property." Ryan looked up at him. He took in the man's face, steady professional, doing his job exactly as he had been told to do it. Ryan did not blame him for any of this. That was an important distinction. "I have a reservation," Ryan said for the third time that evening. "The front desk has indicated otherwise," the guard said. "I understand that's frustrating, sir, but I have to follow their guidance. If you'd like to address the matter, you're welcome to contact reservations by phone." Around them, the lobby had not stopped moving, but it had shifted. The guests who remained were aware now, the way people in public spaces always become aware when something slightly off is occurring nearby. A woman near the concierge stand had looked up. A man in a business suit near the lounge had turned his head. No one said anything. No one moved toward him. The eyes were there, and then they weren't the way people withdraw from what they don't want to be part of. Ryan remained seated for one more moment, not out of defiance, out of the specific and deliberate patience of a man who had already decided exactly how this was going to end, just not yet. He picked up his duffel. He reached down and gathered the white gardenias from where they had rested on his lap. He stood up, straightened his jacket, and turned toward the door, walking at an even pace past the front desk, where Claire and Megan stood without looking at him, through the lobby where no one spoke, and out toward the entrance, where from somewhere behind him, a single voice broke the quiet. "Hold on." It was not loud. It did not need to be. There was something in the quality of it, unhurried, direct, the voice of someone who was not performing authority, but simply had it, that carried across the marble floor without effort. Ryan stopped walking. He turned around. A woman in her mid-50s was crossing the lobby from the direction of the housekeeping corridor, still carrying a clipboard. She was not dressed for the front of house. Her uniform was the pale gray of the operations team, her name badge smaller and plainer than the ones worn at reception. She had silver-streaked hair and the kind of face that did not waste expressions. She was looking at the front desk, not at Ryan. "What exactly is the issue here?" she said. Her name badge read, Dolores Hayes. She was the head of housekeeping, and she had no reason to be involved in any of this. But she was standing in the lobby anyway, clipboard in hand, and she was asking the question as if she expected a real answer. Nobody had asked Dolores Hayes to come out to the lobby. That was the first thing Claire noticed, and it landed with a particular kind of discomfort, the discomfort of someone who had done something in a space they believed was unobserved, only to find that it wasn't. Dolores was housekeeping. She had no formal authority over front desk operations, no rank that placed her above either receptionist in the chain of command. What she had instead was 22 years at Carter Hospitality Properties, long enough to have worked alongside every department, at some point long enough to know how the hotel's reservation system was structured from back-of-house coordination on VIP arrivals. She carried a clipboard that seemed permanently attached to her hand, and she had a very specific look on her face that the more experienced members of the hotel staff had learned to take seriously. She crossed the lobby without hurry, her flat shoes quiet on the marble, and stopped at the edge of the front desk. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. "I asked what the issue is," Dolores said. "Someone want to fill me in?" Megan was the one who answered. She kept her posture straight and her tone professional, the way someone does when they believe they are fully in the right and simply need to explain it clearly to someone who wasn't there. She told Dolores that the guest had presented himself at the desk, that they had searched the system thoroughly under multiple criteria, and that there was no reservation to be found. She said the matter had been escalated appropriately, meaning security had been notified, and that the guest had been asked to follow up through proper channels in the morning. Dolores listened to all of this without interrupting. When Megan finished, Dolores looked at Ryan still standing near the entrance duffel over his shoulder, flowers in hand, and then back at the desk. "What name did you search?" she asked. "Carter," Claire said. "Ryan Carter. We checked the main system and the corporate account. Nothing came up." "Did you check the executive pre-arrival queue?" Dolores said. A very brief silence followed. It was the kind of silence that contains an answer before anyone speaks it aloud. "That's not typically part of our check-in protocol," Megan said. Dolores set her clipboard down on the counter without ceremony and moved around to the back of the desk. Claire shifted slightly to make room, though her expression suggested she was doing it under protest. Dolores sat down at the terminal and began typing, and the lobby settled into the specific kind of quiet that occurs when everyone present understands that something is being determined and no one is entirely sure which direction it will fall. Ryan had not moved from his position near the entrance. He watched Dolores work the economy of her movements, the absence of performance in anything she did. She was not making a point. She was solving a problem. That was a meaningful distinction, and he filed it away. Less than 2 minutes passed before Dolores leaned back from the screen. "It's here," she said. "Executive pre-arrival. Carter Ryan. Confirmed reservation flagged as a standing account. It's been in the system since yesterday afternoon." The air in the lobby changed. It was not a dramatic shift. No one gasped. No one moved suddenly. But something in the atmosphere compressed the way pressure changes before weather arrives. Claire stood very still behind the counter. Megan's hands, which had been resting folded on the desk, dropped to her sides. The security guard, who was still standing a few feet from Ryan, looked across the lobby at the front desk with an expression that suggested he would have preferred not to be present for any of this. Ryan walked back to the desk. He set his duffel down again in the same spot where it had been before, and he looked at Dolores. "Thank you," he said. "It should have come up on a standard search," Dolores said. She said it plainly without accusation in her voice, but the plainness was its own kind of statement. "The executive queue is in the same system. You just have to know to look." She printed the confirmation from the terminal and placed it on the counter. Ryan picked it up and looked at it. His name, his reservation. Exactly as he had said it would be in the exact system it was always going to be in. He set the paper back down. "I'd like to speak with the general manager," he said. The request was quiet and entirely without edge. But in the context of everything that had just occurred, It landed in the room with significant weight. Claire glanced at Megan. Megan looked at the screen. Neither of them said anything immediately, which was itself an answer to a question no one had asked out loud. "Mr. Bennett may not be available at this hour," Claire said finally. "I'd like you to check," Ryan said. What followed was a series of small procedural actions. A phone call made from the back office, a wait of several minutes. Another phone call that Ryan watched from the lobby without sitting down this time. He stood near the center of the room, the flowers resting against the side of his duffel, now his coat still on. Dolores had retrieved her clipboard and was standing a few feet away, not hovering, not performing concern, just present. He appreciated that more than he would have said. The guests who had been in the lobby when the security guard arrived had mostly dispersed up to their rooms out to dinner, wherever the evening had called them. A few remained, and those few had the careful stillness of people who were aware that something was happening and had decided to be somewhere else, without actually leaving. The woman near the concierge stand had found something very interesting on her phone. The man in the business suit had ordered a second drink. Michael Bennett appeared from the corridor that led to the management offices. He was in his mid-50s, a tall man with the cultivated composure of someone who had been running hotels long enough to walk into almost any situation without showing surprise on his face. His suit jacket was on, which meant he had put it on quickly when he got the call, and his expression was professionally neutral as he crossed the lobby. He was looking at the front desk. Then his eyes moved to Ryan. Ryan watched the moment happen. He had seen it before, that specific sequence of recognition in a person's face, when they realize that the situation is not what it appeared to be. It moved through Bennett in stages first, the ordinary assessment of a guest complaint, then something that didn't fit, then a sharpening of attention, then the expression of a man who had just understood exactly how badly the evening had gone. Bennett had seen Ryan's photograph, had attended 2 regional leadership meetings, where Ryan had spoken, had received communications under Ryan's name for the better part of a decade. He knew the face. He had simply not expected to find it here, dressed like this, standing in his lobby at 10:30 on a Tuesday night. Bennett crossed the remaining distance to the desk without changing his pace, which Ryan gave him credit for. He stopped in front of Ryan and said with the measured calm of someone who was choosing every word carefully, "Mr. Carter, I had no idea you were coming in this evening." "No," Ryan said. "You weren't supposed to." The 2 men looked at each other for a moment. Around them, the lobby was very quiet. Claire had gone still at the desk. Megan had taken a small step back, as if distance might help with something. The security guard had found a reason to be elsewhere. "Is there anything I can get for you immediately?" Bennett said. "We'll have your room prepared at once, and I'll personally ensure that." "That's all right," Ryan said. "I don't need anything right now. What I'd like is for you to pull the guest complaint records for this property. I want to see them tomorrow morning. Everything from the past 18 months. He said it the way you say something that has already been decided. Not a request exactly, but not a command delivered for the pleasure of delivering it. Something more operational than either. Tonight I'd like the room." Bennett nodded. He moved to the desk himself, took over the check-in process, and within 4 minutes, Ryan had a key card and an apology that Bennett delivered, with the precision of someone who understood exactly how insufficient it was. Ryan accepted it without comment. He picked up his duffel and his flowers, and he moved toward the elevator. He did not look back at Claire or Megan. He did not need to. The look on their faces in the periphery of his vision as he turned away told him everything he needed to know about what they were feeling in that moment, and what they were feeling, he suspected, was the specific and very unpleasant sensation of watching a ceiling collapse onto a floor that had seemed perfectly solid minutes before. In the elevator, Ryan pressed the button for the 8th floor and stood with his back to the mirrored wall. The doors closed. The lobby disappeared. He looked at the white gardenias in his hand, slightly crushed now at one side, where he had held them too tightly. At some point during the evening, the petals still intact, but the paper wrapping bent out of shape. He straightened the paper as best he could. What he was feeling was not satisfaction. He had learned over the years to be suspicious of satisfaction in moments like this, because it usually meant he was focused on the wrong thing. The wrong thing was what had been done to him. The right thing, the thing that actually mattered, was everything the evening had revealed about what was being done repeatedly to people who did not have a key card waiting at the end of it. He thought about what the threshold was, what visible marker of worthiness had to be present before that warmth at the front desk was switched on. And he thought about how many times a day it was being switched off for people who had done nothing wrong except arrive without it. The elevator reached the 8th floor. Ryan stepped out into the corridor. It was quiet up here, the carpet thick, the lighting low and warm. He walked to his room, slid the key card into the door, and pushed it open. The room was exactly what it was supposed to be. Clean, well-appointed, the turn-down service already done a small card on the pillow from housekeeping. Everything in its proper place. He set his duffel on the luggage rack and laid the flowers on the desk by the window. He stood there for a moment, looking out at the city below the grid of streetlights, the lit windows of other buildings, the ordinary nighttime geometry of a place going about its business. Tomorrow, he would look at 18 months of complaint records. Tomorrow, he would sit in a room with Michael Bennett and whoever else needed to be in that room, and they would go through what the numbers said and what the numbers meant. Tomorrow, he would make decisions. But tonight, there was something else he needed to do first. He took the gardenias from where he had laid them on the desk and found a glass in the bathroom, filled it with water, and placed the stems inside as carefully as he could manage. The petals were still white, still intact more or less. He set the glass on the windowsill, where the light from the street caught the edges of the flowers and made them faintly luminous, and he sat on the edge of the bed and looked at them for a long time without speaking. The room was quiet. The city below continued. He had not forgotten what day it was. He wasn't going to forget. Downstairs in the lobby of the Carter Grand Dolores, Hayes had retrieved her clipboard from the front desk and returned to the housekeeping corridor without fanfare. She had not asked who the man was. She had not asked why it mattered that his reservation was found or what would happen next. She had simply seen something that was not right, asked a reasonable question, found the answer, and made sure the answer reached the right place. That was the entirety of what she understood herself to have done. She would find out the rest of it soon enough. The meeting was scheduled for 9 in the morning. By 8:45, the conference room on the 2nd floor of the Carter Grand was already full. Michael Bennett at the head of the table, the front desk supervisor, the head of HR for the property, and 2 members of the regional operations team who had driven in that morning after Bennett made the calls the night before. The room had the particular atmosphere of a gathering where everyone present understood that something significant was going to be said, and no one was entirely sure how bad it was going to be. Ryan arrived at 9 exactly. He was dressed the same way he had been the night before, same jacket, same worn duffel set outside the door. He had not made any effort to look different, and the people in the room noticed that. He sat down at the table, set a folder in front of him, and looked around at the assembled faces without any particular expression. "Thank you for being here," he said. "I want to start by saying that what happened last night is not the reason we're in this room. It's the occasion for it. The reason is the complaint record." He opened the folder. Bennett had sent the files to Ryan's room at 6 that morning. 18 months of guest feedback, flagged complaints, internal incident reports, and the responses logged by management. Ryan had been reading since 6:15. He had not eaten breakfast. He had made a series of marks in the margins of the printed pages, small and precise, the kind of notations a person makes when they are building an argument they intend to be irrefutable. What the record showed was not a single incident. It was a pattern. Over the course of 18 months, there had been 23 formal complaints related to front desk conduct at the Carter Grand. Of those, 23, 11 had referenced feeling dismissed, unwelcome, or treated differently from other guests. Of those 11, 7 had been resolved with a form letter and a complimentary amenity. 2 had been escalated to the front desk supervisor and closed without further action. 2 had received no documented response at all. Across all 23 complaints, the names Claire Brooks and Megan Foster appeared in the incident logs a combined total of 14 times. Ryan laid this out methodically, moving through the pages without theatrics. He did not editorialize. He simply read what the record said, and the room listened to it, the way you listen to something you knew was there, but had been hoping wouldn't be said aloud. When he finished, he set the papers down and looked at Bennett directly. "How many of these did you review personally?" Ryan said. Bennett's composure held but only just. He was a careful man, 20 years in hotel management, good instincts, the kind of professional who could navigate a difficult conversation without losing his footing. But there was no good footing in this particular room, and he knew it. "The escalated ones," he said. "The 2 that came to the supervisor level. And the others? They were handled at the department level," Bennett said. "Standard protocol for low-severity complaints." Ryan nodded slowly. "The problem," he said, "is that individually each one of these looks low severity. A guest felt rushed. A guest felt the staff was curt. A guest felt unwelcome. Any single one of those is easy to categorize as an isolated incident and address with an apology and a bottle of wine." He closed the folder. "But you read all of them together, and something else becomes visible. And no one read them together. That's what I want to understand. Not why 2 employees behaved badly, but why the system that was supposed to catch a pattern like this didn't catch it." The room was quiet. The HR director, a woman named Sandra Pruitt, who had been with the property for 4 years, was writing something in her notepad. The regional operations team members were not writing anything. They were looking at the table. Bennett said, "I take responsibility for that." "I know you do," Ryan said. "I'm not asking you to take responsibility. I'm asking you to help me understand how it happened so we can make sure it doesn't continue happening at this property or any other one." He leaned forward slightly. "Because here's the question that matters most. How many people came through that front desk in the past 18 months and were treated the way I was treated and simply left no complaint filed? No form submitted. Just a person who came to one of our hotels and walked away, believing that they were not welcome there. We don't have a record for those people. We can't pull a file on them. They're just gone." No one in the room answered because the question was not one that had an answer. It was the kind of question designed to make the shape of the problem visible, and it was working. Sandra Pruitt had stopped writing. She was looking at Ryan with an expression that was not quite guilt and not quite shock. Something between them, the face of someone recalibrating. Ryan let the room sit with that for a moment before he continued. He told them what the outcome was going to be. He said it without anger, without the performance of restraint that people sometimes use when they want you to notice how much they're holding back. He simply said it the way you say something that has already been thought through completely and arrived at from a place of clarity rather than reaction. Claire Brooks and Megan Foster would be terminated. This was not a punitive decision made in the heat of the previous night, he said. It was a conclusion supported by 14 logged incidents over 18 months, a documented pattern of conduct that had been addressed insufficiently at every level, and the events of the previous evening, which had been witnessed by multiple guests and staff members. The front desk supervisor would be placed on a formal performance review. The complaint review process for the property would be restructured so that no cluster of related incidents could accumulate without triggering a mandatory escalation to the general manager's desk. Bennett received all of this without interruption. He was not the kind of man who looked for exits when a conversation became difficult, which was one of the reasons Ryan had not yet made a final decision about his future at the property. That decision was still being formed. "There's one more thing," Ryan said. He picked up a separate sheet from the folder, a single page, not part of the complaint file. "I want to talk about Dolores Hayes." The name shifted the temperature in the room in a way that was almost physical. Sandra Pruitt looked up. Bennett's expression moved briefly into something that was closer to relief than anything else that had appeared on his face all morning. Dolores Hayes. Ryan said had done something the night before that most people in that lobby had not done. She had seen a situation that wasn't her department, not her chain of command, not her problem in any official sense, and she had stopped anyway. She had not done it because she knew who Ryan was. She had done it because she saw something that was not right, and she had the instinct or the character, he wasn't sure which word was more accurate, to act on it. He said that in 23 complaints, her name appeared exactly once in a guest comment from 8 months ago. The comment said that a member of the housekeeping staff had gone out of her way to help a guest locate a lost item staying 30 minutes past her shift to resolve it. The guest had not known her name at the time. They had described her as the woman with the silver hair and the clipboard, and they had said she was the best thing about their stay. Ryan set the page down. "I'd like to offer Dolores a new role," he said. Director of Guest Experience Training, reporting to Regional Operations, with scope across all 11 properties. Her job would be to build the training program that prevents the next 18 months from looking like the last 18 months. Sandra Pruitt said. "Does she know about this?" "Not yet," Ryan said. "I wanted to put it in front of this group first, and then I'd like to speak with her myself." The meeting wrapped up within the hour. The operational decisions were documented. The HR procedures were initiated, and Bennett walked out of the conference room, looking like a man who had survived something and was not entirely sure yet what it had cost him. Ryan stayed behind after the others left, sitting at the table with the folder closed in front of him and the city visible through the window, the same city he had looked at the night before from the 8th floor, a different angle, the same grid of ordinary life going about its business. Ryan picked up the folder and stood up from the table. He found Dolores on the 3rd floor, finishing her morning inspection of the housekeeping stations. She was moving down the corridor with her clipboard, checking linen carts, noting something moving on the same efficient rhythm he had watched in the lobby the night before. She saw him coming and stopped, and her expression did the thing he had noticed before. It registered information without performing a reaction to it. "Mr. Carter," she said. "Ms. Hayes," he said. "Do you have a few minutes?" She looked at her clipboard, then at him. "I have the 4th floor after this," she said, "but yes." They stood in the corridor, which was not how Ryan had imagined the conversation, but it was where they were, and it suited the straightforwardness of what he wanted to say. He told her what he had in mind, what the role would involve, what it would mean for the organization. He said it clearly and without decoration. Dolores listened. When he finished, she looked at him for a moment. In that way, she had the way that made you feel you were being read rather than regarded. "Why me?" she said. "Because you did the right thing when it wasn't your job to do it," Ryan said. "And because the right thing in your case was not dramatic, it was just accurate. You saw what the situation actually was, and you acted on that. That's not a common skill. It's not something I can put in a training manual and teach someone to have. But I think you can help me build a program around the other things, the procedures, the standards, the habits of attention that give people with that instinct the framework to use it well." Dolores looked down at the clipboard in her hands, then back up. "I've been in housekeeping for 22 years, she said. "I know," Ryan said. "I don't have a background in training or curriculum design." "I know that too," Ryan said. "You'd have support for the parts you don't know yet. What you can't be given is the part you already have." He looked at her steadily. "I wouldn't ask if I didn't think you could do it. I've been doing this long enough to know the difference." She looked at him for another moment. Then she nodded once, the way she did everything without excess. "All right," she said. "I'll do it." Ryan thanked her and left her to finish her floor. He took the stairs down to the lobby. The morning crowd had arrived, checkout lines at the desk, luggage in transit, the ordinary organized motion of a hotel moving through its day. He crossed the lobby without stopping, pushed through the revolving doors, and stepped out onto the street. The morning was gray and cool, the kind of weather that promises nothing in particular. Ryan stood on the sidewalk for a moment, his duffel over his shoulder, the city moving around him. In a few hours, he would be on the road to the next property. Not this one's problems to fix. Just the next set of numbers that didn't quite add up the next lobby he had not yet walked into. There were 10 remaining properties in the Carter Hospitality portfolio. He had visited 3 of them in the past 6 months. The others were waiting. He turned up his collar against the morning air and started walking. He was thinking about what came next. The program Dolores would build the standards. It would set the people who would be trained under them, the guests who would arrive at Carter properties in the months and years ahead, and be received the way they should have always been received. A thing that had not happened yet and might not work exactly as intended, but was at the very least pointed in the right direction. He had built 11 hotels on the belief that the way you treat people is the only thing that matters in the end. Not the marble floors or the warm lighting or the instrumental music playing at the right volume in the lobby. Those things mattered, but they weren't the thing. The thing was simpler and harder than any of them. It was the decision a person made in a moment, when no one was watching and nothing was required of them, about whether someone else's dignity was worth their time. He had spent a career trying to make that decision easier for the people who worked for him. He had not always succeeded, but that was the work, and he was still at it. And this morning, on a gray sidewalk outside a hotel that was going to be better than it was yesterday, that felt like enough.